it's working. Yours doesn't do the countdown. Mine does. It's weird. Anyway, hi folks. We're driving back from Indianapolis, and this has been what a week this has been. The first week of the new semester. We've had a team of folks up at IU Bloomington on the ground, pounding the pavement in robin egg blue shirts, and they've signed up 1,100, 1,200 people.
It's been a ton of people.
I mean, in 2 days, more than 1,000 people, new students, registered to vote here in the 9th District. So pretty exciting stuff. And I got sunburned in Bloomington again, which is like my thing. It's what I do. It's part of my campaign shtick. I go to Bloomington, I get sunburned. Anyway, we're headed back. We're almost back to New Albany, but I got to do this Ask Dan segment because, I said I would. I'm trying to fulfill my campaign promises. And this question this week comes from Facebook follower Alex. It's particularly poignant given what's been going on. And he wants to know, let me ask point blank, if elected, how would you use your office to push back against white supremacist violence? Right? Most of you know my background is in civil rights, as an activist first and as a lawyer second. And this is stuff that's very much in my wheelhouse, and as sort of an introduction to this kind of thing and how to use the law, how to change the law to affect that situation, the situation of race in America. Everyone in the country should read Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. But as far as, what can we do in the legislature? I'm coming from a background in the judicial branch where, we use existing laws to sue people, right? Employers or people who do bad things. And that's sort of one side of things. But as far as how do we craft legislations, or how do we as elected leaders take on the challenge of white supremacist violence or white supremacy in general, that is a bit of a different nut to crack. And I think there's a temptation that we have in the United States to say that government can't fix the problem because we've been sold the idea that government just can't change minds and can't change attitudes. And my personal philosophy of government is that I don't think that's true. I think, if you look at the President of the United States of America, people look to him, as scary as this may be right now, to be the moral compass for the nation, in a way. Whether you realize it or not, I think some of that stuff happens on a subtle level. But we emulate the behavior of people that are in authority. And that's just part of the human condition. And a lot of times what people start believing is morally right is in fact just right because authority figures say so. So when you've got an institution, a major institution that governs aspects of our day-to-day lives, like the courts, the executive branch, the legislature, people want to identify with the positions of that institution. So it's important when we have those institutions condemn bad things, right, like racism and white supremacist violence and outright Nazism, the kind of stuff that we've seen over the last week. Look, for example, at the Civil Rights Act of 1964, right? That is the law that ensures that we can all eat at the same lunch counters, right? People don't have to go to the back of the bus. We don't have to have separate water fountains, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? That's legislation that has sort of enshrined that idea, and I think having that made into law during the LBJ years made a big difference in the American psyche, and for a while it made it even totally taboo to be openly racist in American society, right? So what we're worried about now is authority figures that don't condemn it strongly enough, and therefore sort of make that taboo go away. my wish list for what the federal government would do, and this is mostly executive branch stuff. And you've asked me to be specific, so I'll try to get down in the weeds a little bit here. So in late June, the Department of Homeland Security eliminated 3 very big dollar grants to organizations that were working to de-radicalize white supremacists, to de-radicalize neo-Nazis in the United States. And I would certainly push to reestablish funding for programs like that. Again, this is executive branch stuff, but I think it's important. It's another one of those areas in which we invest a little bit of money up front, and it saves us a lot of time and it saves us a lot of money and a lot of heartache over the long term. I would like to see a Department of Justice and other executive branches that vigorously enforce our civil rights laws that already exist. You know, it's the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871 that has been kicking white supremacist ass for the last, 150 years. That same act that was passed in 1871 that has been used, it was essentially used in the 1870s to chase the first Ku Klux Klan out of existence. It's been very effective when you have someone to enforce it. And I don't want to come off as cynical here, but I'm not necessarily sure that the Sessions administration is going to be the most vigorous enforcer of that law. But, the truth of the matter is that it's waned in enforcement over time since the 1870s, by the federal government anyway. So that's executive branch stuff, and it really is a wish list type of thing in terms of legislation that we can support. Look, I'll support any legislation that serves to dismantle white supremacy. And that's kind of a broad umbrella. It means shutting down the drug war by removing marijuana from the Controlled Substances Act. We move to a model that treats drug addiction in general like a public health problem rather than just as a criminal justice problem, because a lot of, the basis for the war on drugs is essentially racist in nature to begin with, primarily racist in nature. And I think we got to acknowledge that and say, all right, well, we need to take it out of the criminal justice box and put it where it belongs and where it belonged all along, which is in the public health box. Getting rid of private, for-profit corporate entities involved in the criminal justice system. And these are just a few examples in particular. And something that Michelle Alexander talks about in the new Jim Crow. I think we can start looking at a legislative fix to overturn a case called McCleskey versus Kemp. And that is a case that essentially prohibits people like me, civil rights lawyers, from litigating what we call disparate impact race cases in the criminal justice system. So if there's an aspect of the criminal justice system that affects people of color more than white people, and that's just about every aspect of the criminal justice system, we can't challenge that unless we can somehow prove that there is deliberate discrimination on the basis of race, which is almost impossible to prove. But when you look at the effects are definitely reflect sort of racist and racial bias, right, within the criminal justice system. We can't attack that right now, and that requires a legislative fix. Employment, is another big thing. I think we can fight white supremacy in employment by working to tighten up Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, ensure greater protections for workers who've been discriminated against on the basis of their race. As a corollary to that, I think strengthening unions is a good thing to do. It would help a lot with that. It gives employees extra protections. So I would support something like the Employee Free Choice Act that makes it easier for workers to organize and to engage in collective bargaining. Not getting too far down the rabbit hole here, but this touches on tort reform too. If you look at what the Southern Poverty Law Center did, especially in its early years in the 80s and the 90s, they chased the Ku Klux Klan out of existence by bankrupting them. And they were able to do that because of robust tort law that didn't put caps on damages or anything silly like that. And that was part of their whole strategy, mostly using state tort law. So yeah, look, I mean, elected officials have got, I think the big way in which we can really attack this stuff is by messaging, and I alluded to that before. Elected officials have got a unique opportunity to get a message out. We're meeting with people on the ground all the time. We're in the public eye. We sort of have this bully pulpit, and what we say and do matters. So it's important to denounce white supremacist violence, white supremacy, racism, every step of the way, and in the strongest terms possible. And to not give a single inch on that in public discourse. I think that might be the single most effective thing that we can do, because when you step up and you want to be an authority figure, you have to lead by example, and people will ultimately follow your lead. So we've got to be a strong leader. All right, we are back in New Albany, and I got to get tucked into bed because we got a long day tomorrow. But love you guys, and I'll see you again very soon.